Another elderly person died today, and the sad reality is that they are finally free. This was not a random act of violence, not a heart attack, not a natural end to a long life. The newspapers will barely mention it. The public will never know the sad fact that 80% of the reported cases of abuse and neglect are caused by someone related to the victim, most often a son or daughter. This woman died today from abuse and starvation at the hands of her children.
How long is this going to go on?
She's my mother.
I understand that, but I didn't marry your mother. I married you.
This is the only home she has.
Yeah, but...
I'll go.
No. I'll go. What did you say you wanted?
Water. You want water. Water! We can't go anywhere because of you. And I bet you went to bed again, didn't you? I bet. I've just had it with you. Why is it me that has to put up with you and your headaches? You've interrupted this family. You've destroyed any free time or semblance of any life that we have around here. You know, you'd be better off if you were just...
These defenseless victims are often manipulated and controlled into submission. Their next meal or medical visit may depend on their ability to take the abuse. They can't get out. Many can't even communicate due to stroke or illness. They are helpless. They are hostages to this abuse, and they are suffering every day.
Elder abuse occurs in the richest of families and in the poorest of families. It does not discriminate. We cannot identify an abuser by the way he or she looks. We can be sitting right next to someone and would never dream that person would harm their loved one.
It's hard to identify abuse in every case. Sometimes the signs or symptoms go unnoticed, and sometimes people may suspect the abuse, but fail to make the call to alert the proper authorities. As with all forms of abuse, whether it's child abuse, domestic violence, or adult abuse, we know that the cases reported only represent the tip of the iceberg. What about the ones who are not reported? The ones whose emotional scars will never heal and whose physical injuries will never be seen? Abuse doesn't occur in a vacuum. It's in our homes and in some of the institutions that are supposed to take care of our elderly.
The Department for Community-Based Services Division of Protection and Permanency investigates allegations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, both in the community and in long-term care facilities. Each of these investigations requires cooperation among the investigative agencies, including local law enforcement, the Office of Inspector General, which is responsible for certifying, licensing, and monitoring both long-term care facilities and community health partners, and the Office of Attorney General, which is responsible for the prosecution of cases involving criminal activity.
Unfortunately, there is no typical abuser. Each one is different. Elder maltreatment touches every segment of our society. Kentucky is a mandatory reporting state. That means in Kentucky, the law requires any person who suspects abuse, neglect, or exploitation to report it to the Department of Community-Based Services. Persons that commit offenses against the elderly do so for a variety of reasons, which can include power, control, or financial gain. Abuse can also be unintentional, such as self-neglect or lack of proper training of the caregiver. It can also be the result of stress that caregivers are under. The Department for Community-Based Services, along with various community partners, can offer a variety of resources to help lessen the stress that many caregivers feel when caring for an elderly person or vulnerable adult. Assistance is also available to those that may be neglecting themselves. What many people don't realize, though, is that competent adults have the right to refuse adult protective services. So although our social workers attempt to coordinate resources and offer their assistance, we cannot force the person to comply with what we feel is in their best interest. And that is a very difficult thing for families and loved ones to understand. Kentucky is very fortunate to have local coordinating councils on elder abuse. These councils were formed as a result of KRS Chapter 209 and were reinforced by the passage of House Bill 298 during the 2005 General Assembly. This bill strengthened the coalition of partnering agencies in the multidisciplinary response to adult abuse. The coordinating councils are comprised of social workers, law enforcement, members of the judicial system, area agencies on aging, and various other community partners, as well as concerned citizens who have an interest in improving the lives of seniors and vulnerable adults in our Commonwealth. The coordinating councils promote public awareness on elder abuse. They coordinate trainings on a variety of issues for our elders, vulnerable adults, and first responders. And they are tremendous advocates for strengthening legislation that will protect our elders. The councils are always looking for new members to assist them in the hugely important work that they carry out in communities across our Commonwealth.
Subtle abuse is perhaps the most insidious. Many victims are in controlled environments where the caregiver leaves them little ability to communicate with the outside world. This often leaves them terrified and they never tell anyone. They are intimidated and threatened, and the only way we can identify the abuse is to know what to look for.
Sometimes it is very difficult to tell about the abuse because the elderly person may not be able to communicate. We can learn a lot from a victim's physical appearance, though. There may be unusual markings, cuts, constant bruising, or unexplained injuries. There may be a change in the victim's behavior towards certain caregivers, a noticeable fear of people or the situation.
It may surprise you to know that not all abuse is intentional. There are those who suffer from dementia, illness, or poverty, those who don't know how ill they are or how deplorable their conditions around them are and are unable to help themselves. Often elderly caregivers feel they are doing the best they can but are incapable of providing adequate care.
This particular case was investigated just a few weeks ago. This couple has been married 60+ years, and she has suffered multiple strokes and is now bedfast. She can do nothing for herself. She can talk, but she has to be bathed, she has to be fed, she has to be dressed, and she has to be lifted. And they are both in their 80s. His health is now declining because there has been so much stress placed on him that it's become overwhelming to take care of her. He's now losing his patience with feeding her. He's becoming rough while he's dressing her, and these are behaviors that he has never exhibited until now. And I think what really got to me as I sat with the couple, he excused himself for a few minutes and he came back with a picture of his wife. And he said, "I want you to see my beautiful wife. This is how she looked right after we got married when she was 20. Isn't she beautiful?" And she was, and she still is. But now she's an older woman who needs care, love, and compassion.
There are many typical signs of abuse, but some are very subtle. An inability to manage personal finances, hoarding, squandering, or indiscriminately giving money away. These are all indicators that the victim may not be capable of taking care of him or herself. Wandering, refusing to see a doctor, isolation, and substance abuse are all cries for help. When victims fail to keep medical appointments, rapid changes in intellectual functioning and confusion could indicate self-neglect. When personal care, shopping, and daily activities pose a challenge to the elderly person, it could be a direct sign that help is needed and danger is imminent.
Adult abuse, neglect, or exploitation can take several different forms. It can be self-neglect, where the person is unable to care for themselves, or neglect by other people who are supposed to be caring for them, maybe not getting them the proper medical care or other services that they need. There are several different types of abuse: physical, sexual, emotional, and exploitation. We go into homes in the community and do these investigations. We also investigate allegations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation in long-term care facilities with the help of the Office of the Inspector General.
Financial exploitation in Kentucky is defined as obtaining or using an individual's resources, including funds, property, or assets, through deception or intimidation with the intent of depriving that individual of their resources.
Abusers won't fit a perfect profile. They can have reasonable excuses and often appear helpful and educated. Some will blame the elder, others will lie about finances and the medical conditions of the victim. Anyone can become vulnerable when they must depend on others for their care. A caregiver may be stressed, overworked, or untrained. Other high-risk factors may include caregivers who are financially dependent on the victim or who are substance abusers. These victims must rely on others to help rescue them from a dangerous or painful situation.
I remember one particular case where the caregiver was a large man, about 6'5" or 6'6", and he was the woman's adult son. He kicked his mother so severely that she suffered bone fractures, lacerations to her internal organs, cuts to her skin, and bruises all over her body. Thankfully, he was charged with aggravated assault and successfully prosecuted.
We can't stop elder abuse in one day, but there are ways we can limit it and bring the abusers to justice. We can save future victims. You can get the word out. Check in on your distant relatives or family members you haven't seen in a while. Let them know you're there to talk. Offer to help. This is a national problem, one that can only be solved with your help. The frail elderly and other vulnerable adults who have disabilities, who may be incapacitated, lonely, and isolated, all need their family, a friend, a supporter. It is time to reach out. It is time to help.
You need to report when you have concerns that there's an adult in a harmful situation. That's your required obligation as a citizen of Kentucky. Talk to someone who knows how to investigate, but after you've reported, offer your services. This may be through your family, through church, or as a friend. Be a volunteer. Take someone a meal. Visit them. Offer to take them shopping. Help someone celebrate their birthday so they don't have to celebrate alone. Remember, there are responsibility, but all too often, they have no one.
Do you know who's caring for your elderly loved ones? Those caring for our elderly must be properly screened. Learn the signs, check the registry, and follow up on all complaints or symptoms from our elders and others who are vulnerable. Some are trapped by their caregiver. Some are dying of pain and abuse. They need to be rescued. They need help. They need you. And they need you now. Call or write for a copy of this video. Learn all you can. Never be forced to tell yourself you didn't do enough. Frail elderly and people with disabilities, when they are unable to protect themselves, rely on us to care for them and let them live out their years with dignity and with peace. Help them do that.